In this lecture, we're going to add an image to the canvas. Like the button, we can add an image with a game object. To get started, enter Prefab Edit mode for the enemy base prefab. Next, focus on the canvas object from the prefab. Lastly, if the canvas is focused from an angle, you can press the 2D button. After you've got that sorted, let's add an image. On the canvas object, open the Create menu. Let's add an empty game object. The health bar is going to comprise of two images. Firstly, we have a border. Secondly, we'll add the fill. To keep our project organized, we're going to group both images into this game object. Before proceeding, verify that the empty game object is inside the canvas object. Afterward, let's rename the object to health bar. Next, let's create an image from within the canvas game object. Open the Create menu. Select the UI image option. The name of the object will be called Border. The image should have been centered on the canvas. If it wasn't, you can move it with the Rectangle tool. Up until now, we've been avoiding this tool. It was designed for moving 2D objects on the scene. If you're going to resize or move a 2D element, you should always use the Rectangle tool. The other tools are meant for 3D objects. After moving the image to the center of the canvas, let's replace the image. Initially, the image will be a placeholder of a white square. On the inspector, a component called Image has been added. This component is responsible for loading the image. There's a field called Source Image, which accepts the image file. Let's try adding our image. In the window, a list of files is presented. However, none of the images from our project are presented as an option. In the project window, navigate to the Game Assets/Sprites folder. I've provided various images for building the game's interface. One of the files is called Health Bar. This image will be used for displaying the health bar. Despite that, Unity won't allow us to assign this image as a sprite to the game object. But why? Images can be used for different things from within a game. We can use them for textures, skies, or for the UI. Unity requires that images be updated for their intended purpose. If we select the health bar image, there's an option called Texture Type. Set this option to Sprite UI. Next, click Apply. Before moving on, I'm going to apply the same changes to all images from within the Sprites directory. All images from this directory will be used for the UI of our game. I'm going to quickly update them. You should do the same. Let's go back to the health bar container object settings. The images won't appear as an option from the window. Luckily, we'll be able to drag and drop them onto the field. I'm going to drag the health bar image into this field. After adding the image, it'll appear in the canvas. However, the size is awkward. By default, Unity will attempt to fit the image from within the image object's dimensions. We can resize the game object by clicking on the Native Size button. The border should look completely normal. Great! The border should be a child of the health bar object. Before we move the border, the health bar should have the same size as the border. You'll see why in a moment. Let's resize the health bar object to have the same width and height by using the Rectangle tool. Next, let's start adding the fill. The fill is also going to be an image. On the health bar object, add the image object as a child. Set the name to fill. Let's resize the fill game object. The size of the image should be slightly smaller than the border. Otherwise, it may leak out of the border, which we don't want. Lastly, let's drag the fill game object above the border game object. Designing a UI with the old system can be tricky. UI elements are allowed to overlap one another. The object appearing over the other object is based on the arrangement from the hierarchy. Objects placed high in the hierarchy will be positioned behind other UI elements. In this case, the fill should not appear above the border. It should sit behind the border. We're almost finished. The last step is to set the anchor points. I'm going to select the health bar game object, which is the container for the border and fill. Sometimes we may want to resize the health bar. We can use the rectangle tool to do so. By changing the dimensions of this object, the border and fill will also have their dimensions updated. However, the resizing doesn't go as smoothly as we'd like. This problem is due to the anchoring of the elements. Anchors are points in the UI that affect the position and size of an element. It's not uncommon for elements to be moved around. If your game supports various resolutions, you may want to reposition elements around the UI. Anchors guarantee that an element will move proportionally to the parent. Anchors can be a confusing topic to wrap your head around. Luckily, Unity provides presets for handling the most common scenarios. For the health bar, the fill and border should resize proportionally to the parent. I'm going to select the fill game object. Next, in the inspector, there's a button under the Rect Transform component. I'm going to hold down the Alt key. Lastly, I'll select the option at the bottom right corner. The option we've selected will cause an element to stretch with its parent. I'm going to perform the same changes on the border game object. After making those changes, the fill may have been resized. If the fill appears outside the border, you may need to resize it to be within the border. I'm going to quickly do so. I'm going to try resizing the health bar game object with the rectangle tool again. This time, the border and fill are resized proportionally to the parent. Awesome, our images are ready. In the next lecture, we're going to start resizing the fill object.